You think reality is already settled, that events happen first and measurements come later. You imagine the universe running ahead of you, making decisions, recording outcomes, waiting for no one. You believe measurement is passive, just a check, a confirmation of what's already there. You assume the world doesn't pause, doesn't hesitate, doesn't care whether anything is measured. This feels obvious, so obvious it barely feels like an assumption. But in fundamental physics, this picture fails. Outcomes don't always exist in advance. Events don't always finish before they are measured. Reality does not always commit early. This made physicists uneasy. It made Feynman uncomfortable, because if reality waits for measurement, then the order you imagine first happens, then observed is wrong. You live as if the world has already made up its mind. Events feel complete before you arrive. A coin lands, a clock ticks, a particle goes somewhere. You assume these things happen first, and only afterward does anyone bother to check. This picture is so familiar that it feels neutral, uncontroversial, almost invisible. Reality, in this view, is like a finished script. The universe runs its lines whether anyone is watching or not. Measurement is just reading what's already been written. Physics encouraged this belief for a long time. Classical theories describe a world where positions exist before they're measured. Speeds exist before they're calculated. Causes come first, effects follow, and observation arrives late. This works beautifully at human scales. You don't need to measure a falling glass to know it will hit the floor. You don't need a stopwatch for time to pass. So the habit becomes automatic. You stop noticing the assumption underneath, but the assumption is there, quiet, untested. It says that reality is fully formed in advance, that measurement is always secondary, that the universe never hesitates. This is the intuition modern physics slowly dismantles, not loudly, not dramatically, by showing again and again that in certain experiments the script does not seem to exist until measurement forces it to. The trouble starts when experiments stop behaving politely. Physicists set up situations where, according to the old picture, the outcome should already be decided. Something should have happened, somewhere. But when they delay measurement, the expected story doesn't appear. Instead of revealing a hidden result, the experiment behaves as if no result exists yet. Not unknown, unmeasured, undecided. Change when you measure, and the outcome changes. Change what you choose to measure, and the past behavior seems to rearrange itself to match. This is where intuition begins to slip. You want to believe the result was always there, quietly waiting. You want measurement to act like a flashlight, not a switch. But the data refuses that role. In these setups, the system does not act like it has chosen a single outcome in advance. It behaves as though it is keeping multiple options open, not as a trick, not as uncertainty in your knowledge, but as part of its physical behavior. Only when measurement happens does one option become real. Before that moment, asking what happened produces no stable answer. Different measurement choices lead to different, incompatible histories. This is deeply uncomfortable because it suggests that reality is not merely hidden from you until you look. It suggests that reality itself is waiting. Waiting for a question sharp enough to force a reply. The first instinct is to soften the problem. You tell yourself that measurement must be intrusive, that the act of measuring simply disturbs what was already there. This explanation feels safe. You shine light on something small. You push it. You alter its motion. Of course, the outcome changes. In this story, reality stays intact. The result existed all along. You just interfered with it. For a while, this explanation worked, but it didn't survive careful testing. Physicists made measurements gentler. They delayed them. They designed experiments where the system could not know in advance what would be measured. The strange behavior remained. Outcomes still depended on measurement, even when the disturbance could be made arbitrarily small, even when no energy was transferred in any meaningful way. More unsettling still, results changed based on which information could exist, not whether anyone actually recorded it. If the setup allowed a distinction to be made, the system behaved one way. If it didn't, the system behaved another. This is where the old explanation collapses. Measurement is not merely checking a box. It is not reading a label already attached to reality. In these cases, measurement functions like a decision point. It determines which facts are allowed to exist at all. And once you see this, the comforting picture of a pre-written universe becomes impossible to maintain. At this stage, the language itself begins to fail. Words like event, outcome, history quietly assume that something definite has already happened. But the experiments no longer justify that assumption. So physics is forced to speak differently. Before measurement, the system is not in one state or another. It is not hiding a secret answer. It is not waiting for you to uncover the truth. It exists as a structured set of possibilities, not guesses, not ignorance, not a lack of information in your head, physical possibilities, ones that can overlap, ones that can cancel, ones that can combine. This is the distinction intuition struggles with most. You are comfortable with unknown facts. You are not comfortable with facts that do not yet exist. But here, the theory insists on exactly that. Before measurement, there is no single outcome to point to, no finished story to reconstruct, only a rulebook that assigns weights to what could become real. Measurement does not uncover one of these possibilities. It terminates the rest. It converts a field of options into a single fact. This is not because reality is vague. The rules are precise. The probabilities are exact. What is missing is commitment. Reality, in this view, does not rush to decide. It remains suspended until measurement forces a distinction that cannot be undone. And this is where the word weight begins to feel uncomfortably literal. Feynman had no trouble using the theory. He could calculate with it, predict outcomes, design experiments that worked exactly as expected. What bothered him was not its success. It was what the success demanded you accept. The mathematics refused to describe a world where outcomes exist quietly in advance. It did not talk about particles carrying hidden answers. It did not describe events unfolding behind the scenes. It described probabilities that only become facts at measurement. And Feynman did not try to make this feel normal. He warned against the temptation to soften it, to smuggle classical pictures back in, to tell stories about ignorance instead of indecision, because every time physicists tried to imagine the outcome as already decided, the predictions failed. The theory only worked when you stopped asking what really happened and accepted that the question itself was misplaced. This was not philosophical decoration, it was operational truth. You could not ask the system what it did before measurement without changing what the theory meant. Feynman found this deeply uncomfortable because it broke the traditional role of physics. Physics was supposed to describe reality as it is, not reality as it becomes. Yet here was a theory that refused to speak until measurement forced it to. And the refusal was not optional, it was built in. Once you accept that outcomes are not fixed in advance, the structure of the world quietly changes. The universe stops behaving like a machine that runs ahead of you and leaves evidence behind. Instead, it behaves like a process that withholds commitment. This does not mean anything is sloppy or undefined. The rules are strict, the predictions are sharp. What is missing is finality. Until measurement occurs, the system does not select a single version of events. It evolves without choosing one history over another. This is not delay in your knowledge. It is delay in the world itself. And this forces a strange reversal. You are used to thinking that time flows first, and facts crystallize along the way. But here, facts only crystallize when measurement pins them down. Before that, there is no completed past to consult, no definite story to replay. Different measurement choices do not merely reveal different aspects of the same history. They participate in deciding which history becomes real. This is where discomfort deepens, because it suggests that reality does not fully exist independently of the questions asked of it. Not everywhere, not always, but precisely at the moments where measurement forces a distinction that cannot be reversed. Reality does not rush. It commits late. And once it commits, it behaves as though it had always been that way. By the end, the word measurement no longer means what you thought it did. It is not simply recording. It is not passive confirmation. It is not a neutral glance. Measurement is the point at which the world stops postponing. Before that moment, there is no single fact to uncover, no finished event hiding in the background, only structured possibilities waiting for resolution. When measurement occurs, something irreversible happens. Alternatives can no longer overlap. The system becomes entangled with the world beyond itself. Information leaks out and cannot be taken back. This is not about observers or consciousness. No one needs to watch. No mind is required. What matters is irreversibility. A distinction is forced into the world. A choice becomes permanent. A history becomes the history. After that, reality behaves as though it had always known what to do. This is where philosophical discomfort replaces explanation. Because if reality only becomes definite at certain moments, then what exists is not a static inventory. It is a process of commitments. The universe is not a completed object that you peer into from the outside. It is something that keeps deciding, quietly, reluctantly, only when it must. And outside those moments, reality is not wrong.